My brother got a car on his birthday. Not a used car, not a practical car. A $45,000 SUV with a bow on the hood, and my parents standing in the driveway with the keys, and the expression of people who had been planning this moment for a long time and were very pleased with how it was landing. I was standing 10 feet away. I had turned 31 the previous month. My birthday had produced a card and a dinner at a restaurant my parents chose because my father liked the steak there. I said nothing about the car. I smiled, and I shook my brother's hand, and I ate my sister-in-law's potato salad, and I drove home thinking about the last 8 years and the specific texture of being told there was no money while watching money move. I should have kept driving. Instead, I went inside and I opened my laptop. 3 hours later, I had a spreadsheet. 8 years, $180,000. My brother's name on every line. My name is Ryan Foster. I am 33 years old and I work in financial analysis for a commercial real estate firm in Dallas. I am good with numbers. This is not a personality quirk. It is a professional skill I have developed over a decade of working with financial data and that I apply, by habit, to the world around me, including the world of my own family. The skill had been telling me something for 8 years. I had been choosing not to listen. My brother is Kyle. He is 37 years old. We are not enemies and we are not close. We are brothers who grew up in the same house and became different people and who see each other at Christmas and at birthdays and at the kinds of family events that require attendance regardless of whether you would have chosen to be there. Kyle has made a series of financial decisions over the past decade that have not worked out. Not because he is stupid, he is not. Because he is optimistic in the specific way that people are optimistic when they have always had a safety net and have never fully experienced what happens without one. The safety net had a name. It was our parents. I did not build the spreadsheet to build a case. I want to be honest about that. I built it because I was sitting at my kitchen table after my brother's birthday party, and I was tired, and I wanted to understand what I had been watching for 8 years, and whether what I had been watching was what I thought it was, or whether I was constructing a grievance from coincidences. I am a financial analyst. When I want to understand something, I put it in a spreadsheet. I started with what I knew directly, the things I had witnessed or been told about explicitly. 2016. Kyle's first business, a gym equipment distribution company, ran into cash flow trouble. My parents provided $22,000 described as a loan. The business closed. The loan was not repaid. 2017. Kyle's car lease ended. My parents co-signed a new lease and covered the first 6 months of payments, approximately $4,800, while Kyle got back on his feet. 2018. Kyle and his wife bought a house. My parents provided $35,000 for the down payment. This was described as a gift because, my father said, they wanted to help the kids get established. I had asked about help getting established when I bought my apartment in 2017. My father had said they were a little tight at the moment, but they were proud of me for doing it on my own. I had done it on my own. 2019. Kyle's second business, an online retail operation, needed startup capital. My parents provided $18,000. 2020. Kyle's wife had a difficult pregnancy. My parents covered $9,000 in medical costs not covered by insurance. I understood this one. I held it differently in the spreadsheet. 2021. Kyle's online retail business ran into trouble. My parents provided $14,000. 2022. Kyle needed a new roof on his house. My parents provided $11,000. 2023. Kyle's third business, a food and beverage concept, needed startup investment. My parents provided $21,000. 2024. The car, $45,000. I added the numbers. $175,800 across 8 years to my brother. I looked at my own column. 2017, apartment down payment. I had asked. My father had said they were a little tight. 2019, I had started my own business, a consulting practice. I ran evenings and weekends for 18 months before deciding the revenue was not sufficient to leave my day job. I had self-funded it. I had not asked my parents because the pattern by 2019 was clear enough that asking felt futile. 2021, I had a medical event, not serious, but requiring a procedure not fully covered by insurance. I had paid $6,200 out of pocket. I had mentioned it to my mother. She had said she was sorry to hear it. My column had one entry, a Christmas check for $500 in 2020 that my parents gave both of us equally. I looked at the spreadsheet for a long time. Then I added the $500 to my column and calculated the difference. $175,300. I stared at that number until it stopped feeling like a number and started feeling like what it actually was. 8 years of my parents' decisions about who needed help and who could manage on their own. If you have ever watched resources move consistently in one direction while you were told there was nothing to move, you already know why this story exists. Subscribe and hit the bell. I'll be here every week. I had built the spreadsheet from memory and from conversations I could reconstruct. I am a financial analyst. Memory and reconstructed conversations are not data. I spent the following week verifying. Not by accessing anyone's private records. I had no access and would not have used it if I had. By going back through the family communications I had saved. Emails where my mother had mentioned the amounts. Text messages where my father had described what they were providing. A family group chat from 2018 where the down payment had been discussed openly enough that the number was in writing. I also called my Aunt Sandra, my father's sister. She and my mother had been close for 30 years, and she had, on 2 separate occasions over the years, made comments to me that I had dismissed at the time, but that now had context. The first comment had been at Thanksgiving 2019. She had said, "Ryan, your parents are very generous people. I hope you know that." I had said, "I know." She had given me a specific look. The second comment had been at Christmas 2022. She had said, "How are you managing?" And the emphasis on managing had been unusual, like the word itself carried something she was not saying directly. I called her on a Wednesday evening. I said, "Aunt Sandra, I need to ask you something directly." She said, "I've been waiting for this call for 2 years." I said, "How much do you know?" She said, "Enough. Your parents have never been secretive about it with me. I think they believe it's the right thing to do. I think they have told themselves so many times that Kyle needs more help that they have stopped examining whether that is true." I said, "Do you know the numbers?" She said, "Not specifically, but Ryan, I know it's significant." I said, $175,000 over 8 years. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's more than I thought." I said, "It's more than I thought, too." I asked my parents to have dinner with me, just the 3 of us, not a special occasion, not a holiday, a Tuesday evening at a restaurant near their house. I did not tell them what I wanted to discuss. I said I wanted to catch up. This was not entirely dishonest. I did want to catch up. I wanted to catch up on 8 years of a financial pattern I had not directly addressed. We ordered. We talked about ordinary things, my work, my mother's garden, a trip my father was planning. The conversation was warm and familiar, and I let it be that for most of the meal. Then I put my phone on the table. On the screen, the spreadsheet, condensed to 1 page. 8 years. Kyle's column and my column side by side. My father looked at the phone. He looked at me. I said, I want to talk about this. My mother picked up the phone. She looked at the numbers. Her face went through several things quickly. My mother said, "Ryan, where did you get these figures?" I said, "From things you told me. Emails, texts, the family chat. I verified what I could." My father said, This isn't a fair way to present this." I said, "Tell me a fairer way and I'll listen." He was quiet. I said, "I'm not asking about any individual decision. I understand each one separately. Kyle's business had a crisis. Kyle needed a down payment. Kyle had a medical situation. I understand each one." I said, "What I am asking about is the pattern. Over 8 years, you have provided Kyle with approximately $175,000 in support. In the same 8 years, you have told me twice that things were tight when I had needs. I am not saying those things were equal. I am saying I would like to understand how you thought about the difference." My mother said, "Kyle has always needed more support." I said, "Mom, that is not an answer. That is a description of the decision. I am asking how you made it." Silence. My father set down his fork. He looked at the table. He was quiet for a long time. My father said, "We thought you didn't need it." I said, "I know you did. What I'm asking is, did you ask?" Another silence. I said, "In 8 years, did you ever call me and say, 'Ryan, we're thinking about helping Kyle with this. Is there anything you need?' Did you ask once?" My father looked up. My father said, "No." I said, "I needed $6,200 in 2021. I mentioned it to Mom. She said she was sorry to hear it." My mother closed her eyes for a moment. I said, "I'm not angry. I want to be clear about that because I have been sitting with this for a week, and I have made sure I am not doing this from anger. I am doing this because I am 33 years old, and I would like to have a relationship with my parents that is honest about what it has been." My father said, "What do you want from us?" I said, "I want you to hear me say that the pattern was not fair. I want to know that you understand it was not fair. I am not asking for money. I am asking for acknowledgement." The table was quiet for a long time. My mother said, "You're right." Not, "We thought we were doing the right thing." Not, "Kyle really did need it more." Just, "You're right." My father took longer. My father said, "I think we convinced ourselves that because you were doing well, it meant you didn't need us. That's not the same as not needing us." I said, "No, it's not. If this moment stayed with you, leave me a comment. Has someone ever assumed you were fine without asking? Tell me what the assuming cost you. I read every single one." Kyle did not know about the dinner. I had not told him, and my parents had not told him. He called me 3 weeks later. Not about the dinner, about something else. He had been thinking about a new business idea, and he wanted to know what I thought. I said, "Tell me about it." He told me. It was an e-commerce concept, the third variation of a model he had tried before. He was enthusiastic in the specific way he always was at the beginning, focused on the upside, not yet engaged with the operational complexity. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Kyle, I want to ask you something." He said, "Sure." I said, "When you think about starting this, have you fully costed it? Not the optimistic version, the realistic one." He said, "I have a rough budget." I said, "Walk me through it." He was surprised. Kyle and I did not usually have this kind of conversation. I was the younger brother. I asked about his family, and he asked about my job, and we did not usually move into the operational specifics of his business decisions. I walked him through the questions I would ask any client presenting a business concept: revenue assumptions, cost structure, cash flow timing, break-even analysis. Kyle said, "You sound like you're interrogating me." I said, "I'm doing what a financial analyst does when someone describes a business to him. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm trying to help you think through it before you commit." He was quiet for a moment. Kyle said, "Is this about the car?" I said, "What?" Kyle said, "You've been different since my birthday. I noticed." I sat with that. My brother had noticed. He had not said anything for 3 weeks, and then he had asked. I said, "I'm not going to lie to you. The car made me think about some things. I had a conversation with Mom and Dad, not about you specifically, about a pattern I had observed over 8 years. Kyle was quiet. I said, "I'm not blaming you for the pattern. You didn't create it. But I need you to know that I see it. And I need you to know that the business question I'm asking you right now is the version of help I can actually give you." Kyle said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Mom and Dad won't always be there. The businesses you've started have cost them. And you've never had to fully reckon with the cost because someone else was absorbing it. I am not your parents. I will not fund your mistakes. What I will do is tell you honestly what I think about this idea before you make it." A long silence. Kyle said, "That's fair." I said, "Tell me about your customer acquisition model." He did. We talked for an hour. I did not soften any of my assessments, but I gave them without judgment and with the specific intention of being useful rather than right. By the end, he had identified 3 significant gaps in his plan that he had not seen before. He called me the following week to say he was revising the model. He called me 3 weeks after that to say he had decided not to proceed with the concept. He said, "The numbers didn't work when I actually ran them." I said, "That's the right conclusion." He said, "Ryan, thank you." That was a new sentence between us. I had never heard it in that tone before. I am 33 years old, and I spent 8 years watching $175,000 move toward my brother, while I was told there was nothing to move toward me. I am not telling you this story to make my parents into villains, or my brother into a person who took something from me. Neither of those frames is accurate. My parents made decisions over 8 years that were shaped by who they saw as needing help and who they saw as managing fine. They saw Kyle as someone who needed help because he repeatedly presented himself in crisis. They saw me as managing fine because I did not present myself in crisis. The category you occupy in a family is often determined by what you show rather than what is true. I was managing fine in the ways that were visible. I was also paying $6,200 out of pocket for a medical procedure in 2021, while my parents said they were sorry to hear it. The first thing I want you to know, managing fine is not the same as not needing anything. Families and employers and institutions and relationships of all kinds have a tendency to direct resources toward the people who signal need loudest, and to assume that the people who do not signal need do not have any. This assumption is incorrect. It is convenient and incorrect. If you are the person in your family who is assumed to be fine, say something. Not because you are in crisis, because the assumption that you are fine has costs that compound over time in ways that are not always visible until someone builds a spreadsheet. The second thing is about Kyle and what his story actually is. Kyle has had 4 businesses. 3 of them have failed. 1 is in progress. He has been funded through each failure by people who love him and who believed that the next attempt would be different. The funding has not helped him. It has insulated him from the feedback that failure is supposed to provide. Every business failure that did not cost him anything real is a business failure that did not teach him what it needed to. He is 37 years old and he is starting his fifth concept. And for the first time in 8 years, someone walked him through the actual numbers before he committed. He decided not to proceed. That may be the most useful thing anyone in this family has done for Kyle in 8 years. Not the $175,000. The hour on the phone with his younger brother, who told him honestly what he saw. The third thing is the most personal. I built the spreadsheet because I needed to understand what I had been watching. I had the conversation because I needed my parents to understand it too. I did not ask for money. I did not demand compensation. I asked for acknowledgement. My mother said, "You're right." My father said, "Because you were doing well, we thought you didn't need us." Those 2 sentences were what I needed, not the $175,000. The acknowledgement that the pattern had existed and that it had not been fair. Sometimes what we need from the people who have not given us what they gave to others is not the thing itself. It is the acknowledgement that they could have. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. Tell me in the comments, has someone ever assumed you were fine without asking you? And which moment stayed with you longer? Building the spreadsheet? Or hearing your father say he thought you didn't need them? I read every single one. If this story reached you today, subscribe. What comes next will stay with you too. Ryan Foster, Dallas, Texas.